The Automated Podcast.
So, welcome to another episode of the Automated Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marc Verbenkov. So, if you're by any chance new to the podcast, I've mentioned in a number of previous episodes how genuinely impressed I've been with the virtual reality technology as I've been trying on different headsets and eventually buying my own over this past year. So I've really been lucky enough to go to conferences, play games, and even visit art exhibitions in virtual reality, and really saw, I think, the potential for this technology during the quarantine here in Spain to be both a tool for improved remote connection as well as interaction. So today, I'm really happy to have David Whelan on the podcast to discuss the work in VR that his company is undertaking, as well as the current and future use of this really exciting technology. So David, if you don't know, is a tech entrepreneur and founder of VR Education PLC and the team behind the Engage platform. So he is a former editor-in-chief, a virtual reality reviewer, and a multi-award-winning VR director and producer with 10 plus years web development background in app creation and programming large CRM systems. He is also the winner of the TimeWarner Award and nominated at the Venice Film Festival as Best Director for his work with the BBC on 1943 Berlin Blitz VR experience. So apart from the interesting work that he talks about on the Engage platform, I really found David to be a wealth of information on VR in general, and hope that this discussion motivates you at the very least to go out and try VR for the first time if you haven't done so. Great. Well, David, thank you very much for coming on to the Automated Podcast.
No problem, Mark. It's great to be here.
Great. So one of the first things that I do with a couple of the other guests here is ask you a little bit about your initial introduction to virtual reality or the technology that you're dealing with. I'm personally a big fan of virtual reality, so for me, it's really great to have you onto the podcast today. But maybe you could just give a couple sentences as to how you became interested in the technology in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So I've always been quite a large tech enthusiast ever since I was growing up watching episodes of Star Trek, and obviously the holodeck. That was really my first introduction to a concept of virtual reality. And for many years, I was a web developer and a web designer, and I've never had access to the technology. Back in the 90s, it was quite expensive to get a VR headset. The first consumer headsets, they were still many hundreds of dollars, which I couldn't afford back then. However, I was browsing a website called Kickstarter about 6-7 years ago, and I came across the original Oculus headset Kickstarter campaign, and it really intrigued me. And it was actually something that looked very, very affordable. And I went to the back to project, and I got the Oculus Rift DK1 development kit, and that was really my first introduction. And as soon as I put on the headset, I was pretty much a convert, and I turned around to my wife at that stage and said, look, this is really where I want to go in my life, where I want to have at least some kind of business or some kind of connection with the VR community. And that's how I really got started.
Awesome. I think that that's a very similar experience to many people, right? Like myself personally, I put on my first kind of modern headset only 1 to 2 years ago, and there was kind of an instant connection with how amazing this technology is. So I can only imagine what it would have been like even 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah, it was a really crazy experience. So one of the very first experiences I got to try on the DK1 was a program called Titans of Space, where you could explore the solar system. And again, it really felt like I was in Star Trek, where I was flying past the planets. And I remember playing a horror game as well, where it really did scare me, where I really felt I was within the application. And this was something, even as growing up playing video games, now I was inside a video game, and I could really see it being transformative to many areas, not just gaming, but education and business as well.
Terrific. Yeah. Okay, I think that kind of sets the initial stage for this conversation that I wanted to have. One of the other things that maybe is a little bit interesting for the audience here is the size or the scope of the VR industry. So before the discussion, I looked into a couple of the statistics here, and the number of VR headsets that have been shipped
worldwide, at least until 2017, or in 2017. There was 3.5 million headsets that were shipped. 2018, there were 4.5, and 2019, there were 6 million. So it's clearly growing rapidly. And one last thing here, there's a consultancy called Greenlight Insights, and they estimated that the total market forecast for VR is going to be 34.5 billion by 2023. So with that in mind, one of the things that I wanted to ask you here was, what do you see as the challenges for the growth of the VR industry?
So a lot of the barriers have really been taken care of over, especially the past 12 months. Now, growth was initially quite slow in the beginning because even though VR headsets were becoming affordable at $400 or $500, you still needed a very powerful PC to get a good VR experience. So you were looking somewhere in the region of about $1,500 to get the PC or laptop and the headset. And also there was quite a lot of choice out there as well. So you could spend $1,000 on a PC and it still not be VR ready. So there's a lot of confusion in the consumer market where people were generally enthused by using VR, but you still needed some kind of technical expertise to purchase the right equipment for you. Now, what's happened over the past 12 months especially is that standalone VR devices like the Oculus Quest and the Vive Focus Plus have come out, which have really made it very easy for a consumer to pick up a product. So for $400 or $500, you can get a really good VR experience. You can put it on your head and get straight into the games, very much like a video games console, like a PlayStation or an Xbox. That makes it very, very easy for consumers to pick up VR experiences. Now, what really has been a barrier, and it really is a double-edged sword, is with the COVID-19 outbreak. What we've seen huge demand for VR devices in homes where people who may have been locked in homes for maybe 2 or 3 months, they're seeking an escape. And one of those ways you can get an escape, because you can't travel anywhere, is putting on a VR headset and exploring the digital world. However, because of COVID-19, many of the manufacturing plants in China were shut down. So supply was actually and less and less, and yet demand was more and more. So getting your hands on a VR headset, it's really been like gold dust. Oculus and HTC have been making the headsets as quickly as they're being sold out, and there's always shortages. But we're actually starting to come out the other side of that now, where manufacturing is really ramping up. And I know Facebook are building a new headset, and there's some other devices coming on the market as well. So that the market had been steady up to the end of 2019. It's really now starting to grow exponentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree further with you. I was actually one of those people that was lucky enough to get an Oculus Quest before the lockdown here in Barcelona. And I can tell you personally that I used the Quest almost daily for conferences, for the escapism that you were alluding to. Very useful. I also think that maybe as we move, or potentially move into the second wave where there's a new round of lockdowns, maybe the manufacturing of these different headsets will be ready for the greater uptake of this technology by the masses, as it were.
Yeah, there certainly is, and there's more players coming into the market as well. So with the rollout of 5G globally, a lot of telecommunications companies have purchased big licenses that cost billions of dollars to upsell 5G. But what they're finding is that consumers really have no need for a 5G service. They're pretty happy with 4G, where they can stream video and they can check emails. Whereas if you have a 5G connection on a VR headset, you can render in very quickly high quality assets, and you can actually do rendering off the headset itself. So you make the headsets lighter, cheaper, and the batteries can last longer as well. So they really see it's vital for VR and AR headsets to succeed, so that they can actually roll out their 5G deployment. So we're going to start seeing telecoms companies releasing their own branded headsets very, very soon. And actually, there's quite a lot of rumors as well about Apple possibly releasing a device next year as well. And as always with Apple, when they release a device and the world takes notice, they'll probably charge 3 or 4 times more than anybody else, but they'll say it's cool and people will really latch into it. And then we will really start seeing a very wide adoption of the technology.
One of the things that maybe leads from what you just said is specifically your company, Immersive VR Education. It's actually creating some showcase experiences as engaging content. And as somebody who owns an Oculus Quest, for instance, it's a little bit limited on the amount of content that it has for the users. Obviously coming out more day by day, but maybe this is one of the barriers that your company is actually dealing with.
Yeah, so the showcase material that we have, really, we were trying to get people excited about the educational possibilities of VR for the general consumer, or the general education system. Before, say, this wave of VR came out, virtual reality has been used in education over the last 40 years, but it's been hugely expensive. So institutions like NASA, the US military, and some high-end medical training institutes have been using VR for training for 40 years. Now, they would not use the technology for that length of time if they didn't prove that it hasn't had a real beneficial effect to the educational outcomes. And then what my company we're trying to achieve is, okay, now that VR is affordable for the general user, where a headset now is less than the price of an iPad, we really should be getting people excited about using the technology for education, for their kids, and for their family at home. So we started creating showcase education experiences, because quite a lot of the early applications for the original Oculus Quest were video games and zombie shooters and rhythm games. Really, there wasn't a lot of educational content out there. There was some great, fantastic apps. There wasn't stuff that had like broad appeal. You might have seen some educational apps that was focused on, say, one area of mathematics, or you might see another educational app that was focused on DNA. Whereas what we created was a historical app where it was Apollo 11, which we felt would have broad appeal for people that just had an interest in the technology, but also an interest in education. So we could really broaden the appeal of VR devices for education. And that was a huge success. And then we followed that up with Titanic. And then we followed that up again with work with the BBC on a Berlin Blitz experience. But these showcase experiences really were just to show people, to open the door, to show people that VR is a very, very useful tool in educational circles. And really what the main focus of our group has been the Engage virtual reality platform, where any educator or corporate trainer can go in and build their own virtual reality experiences using the tools that we have, and then provide them to the world. And not only is Engage a very, very useful tool for creating content, it pretty much is a virtual reality university. And there's a very famous book called Ready Player One. Now, I know there was a movie made about Ready Player One by Steven Spielberg, but if you actually get the book, the first 30% of that book is all about the education system of the future. And we've pretty much built that education system with Engage. And now we're actually starting to see very wide adoption of the platform, where we have universities in America using it. We have Oxford University using it as well. It's been used for medical training. We have the US Air Force Academy in there teaching cadets. So it's really, really started to really blossom, especially in this COVID-19 world, where everybody's been forced online and they're all seeking better ways of communication. And I think VR is the best platform for communication, where currently today, when people say, let's talk online or let's have an online class, really what they're on about is they're having a Zoom call or a Skype call where everybody's in a little window, and there's a real big disconnect where if you have 30 people on a call, half those people are going to mute themselves or turn off the camera, and they're not really attentive, they're not really engaged with what's going on. Whereas in a virtual reality classroom where everybody's wearing a VR headset, even though you're in your own home, your avatar moves the very same as you in the real world. If you fall asleep in a class, your avatar falls asleep in the class and slouches over the table. You know, if you're talking to somebody, you have eye-to-eye contact with that person, you really feel like you're in the room with them. So that's something that this medium can do better than any other medium.
Yeah, I couldn't agree further. I think this is also something that has really been brought to the forefront of I guess you could say, the world through this COVID pandemic, where, as you said, people are forced to have the video conferencing methods of communication rather than the immersive real world face-to-face interaction. I wanted to go maybe a little bit further with regards to the education aspects of the platform. So one of the kind of central ideas of this podcast is really looking at automation's really massive and large scale impact in eliminating low skilled jobs. And one of the things that this leads to is the necessity for reskilling, or a new term called like continuous learning or continuous education. You maybe alluded to it a little bit, but maybe you could explain a little bit further to what extent you think that VR will play in this new paradigm, and how exactly does Engage fit into that?
Yeah, so with Engage, what we're trying to achieve really is to open up good education to everybody globally at a fraction of the cost. So I'm very lucky that I live in Ireland. My education system, by and large, is free. If I want to go to university, if I get the grades, I can go to university and the government will pick up the tab. Whereas if I was in the UK or especially America, if I wanted a good 4-year education at one of the top universities, you're looking at a $200,000 to $300,000 student debt at a minimum. Now, really, what that does is really exclude middle income and lower income families from providing their kids with a quality education. And it's a huge burden to put on anybody. It is my belief that there are people out there in the world today, kids, who are every bit as brainy as Einstein. However, they're flipping burgers in Burger King because they've never had the opportunity. So with a platform like Engage, what we're trying to do is that you can stay at home, but you can attend maybe virtual MIT in the morning for physics, and then you can go to virtual Oxford University in the afternoon for English literature. You can pick and choose your education tailored to your needs from the best educators in the world at a fraction of the cost. Like, one of the big costs for anybody going to university anywhere in the world is the fact that they have to travel to that university if it's not in their home state, and they have to live in, say, a different city, and they have to pay for an apartment. And quite often what the students have to do is they have to work a job part-time, normally late at night at bars and restaurants. And really, it's a big ask to ask any student to work, say, a 6 or 7 hour shift in a bar at nighttime, then get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and do a full day in university and be at their peak performance. That just simply doesn't work. It's a lot better if you can stay at home and still get that great education. Now, really what we're after here is that with online education, with MOOC platforms, massive open online course systems such as Coursera and edX, yes, they say that we have full online education, and they do, in fairness, have that content, but it's all video based, and very few people finish these online courses. It's less than 1 in 5 people. And that's really the issue that we were trying to address with the Engage platform, where if we can raise that bar to, say, 3 in 5 people finishing their courses, then it is going to be a massive success. And now is the time where these headsets are just being rolled out in larger and larger quantities, where we are actually now really seeing the growth come into us here at VR Education.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think that with the Engage platform, it seems to be riding on the wave of a number of these different trends. Some of them you just mentioned. One of the others that I touch on here on the podcast are the types of jobs that are being eliminated. So many of the jobs that, as you mentioned, students have to do, waitressing, working in bars, things like that. There are numerous examples out today where there are different automation systems like robots or entire processes within restaurants that are actually automating those jobs. So to me, as I'm listening to what you're saying, it seems like the platform that your company is creating is really well situated to take advantage of the fact that many of these jobs that students typically use to support themselves, the Engage platform enables the student to still remain at home and take advantage of education without having the problems of having to fund themselves as these jobs are slowly disappearing.
Yeah, they could. I think like jobs will certainly evolve. I do believe that they will be full-time jobs in virtual reality in the future as well, where I could certainly see times where you could get a full consultancy inside virtual reality, where you're sitting in consultancy rooms with, say, doctors in virtual reality, and they're talking to you and they're giving you advice, or maybe like there'll be a huge range of different jobs inside virtual reality, as well as, like, creating full businesses. Like, I think shopping will be in virtual reality as well, where instead of going to a high street and shopping for different clothes, you will be doing that virtually in virtual shopping malls. And there's sports in VR as well. We can see the rise of virtual sports globally, especially in COVID-19, where we had most of the Formula One drivers racing virtual races over the period. We've also seen, obviously, a lot of video game tournaments in VR, but because VR can be very physically active, I think you will actually see athletes inside virtual tournaments in different types of sports or new types of sports. That's something that we haven't seen before. So really, it's such a wide open field that many things can happen. But VR is it's a tool like anything. It can be used for great goodness, and it can also be used in really poor ways as well. And really, we're at the birth of what this can do. So if you had said to me maybe 20 years ago that on my mobile phone, I would be watching content on my mobile phone more than I'd be watching content on a TV or in a cinema screen, I would have said you were crazy. But that's what's happened, and that's how it's evolved. VR is like at the very early stage of when the smartphone came out first. There's a lot of really cool demos and applications out there, but really nobody knows where this is going to go. And I feel education is one of those high growth areas. Education, training, and communication are hugely high growth areas in this industry. And as this technology really progresses, I think these are the key areas that are going to be dominant in the space going forward.
Yep. This is something that I've seen in the research that I've been doing as well for this podcast. Maybe you could speak to Engage a little bit more. Can you give maybe just a basic description of how it works for somebody who has maybe never used VR and certainly never used Engage? Just kind of draw us a picture, if you could.
Yeah, so first and foremost, it is a communications platform where you can go into a virtual classroom or a virtual meeting room, and when you put on a VR headset and you have hand controllers in your hands, when you're in the virtual room, there's a virtual version of you, an avatar, a representation of you in the virtual room. So you can walk around in your real world and your avatar will walk around in the virtual world. You can shake hands with somebody inside the virtual room, and you can be joined by up to 70 people from all over the world in the same virtual room. You can draw on a whiteboard, you can do PowerPoint presentations, or you can stream media on the video screens that we have inside. But because it is virtual reality, you can do some really strange things where you can bring in 3D models. So you can bring in a 3D model of a dinosaur or an aircraft engine, and you can interact with that when you're inside the virtual space. And because it is a virtual space, why even have class in the classroom? So if you want to teach a class about Mars, why don't you bring them to the surface of Mars, and you can see the Curiosity rover moving on the surface. And the great thing about Engage is that it allows you to create content very, very easily. And the way you do that is there's a recording feature, spatial recording feature. And when you click on record, it will record everything that you do and say inside the virtual platform. So if you're a really good, competent presenter and you're presenting something for maybe 20 minutes or half an hour, Engage will record everything you do and say. It will also record your movement and any objects that you bring into the environment. So as soon as you give a class or presentation, you can sit down from the point of view of participants and replay that over again. And if you're happy with your performance, you can publish that for the rest of the world to enjoy. And it's like the performance is happening live. And very recently, we've actually seen a huge demand in Engage for use in events. So we had a HTC event in there recently where it was in China, and we had 1.1 million people watching the live stream. We had 1,000 VR users in there, and we had keynote speakers from HTC themselves, from NVIDIA, and we had people from China Telecom as well. And it was a massive success. So again, like, its communication aspect is really key, and people are really looking at Engage, where there's a lot of shortfalls with video-based platforms, where Zoom is fantastic when you have maybe 4 or 5 people on a call and you need to communicate something, and it's very, very good at that. But if you have maybe 10, 15, 20 people on a Zoom call, it gets very busy very, very quickly, and everybody overtalks each other very, very quickly. That doesn't happen inside a platform like Engage, where we have spatial audio, where somebody is sitting next to you. You can lean over to the person next to you and whisper in their ear, and it sounds like they're right next to you. If you want to ask a question, you simply raise your hand in real life, and your avatar will raise its hand, and the person who's talking to you is looking directly at you. So you're getting all that non-verbal communication that you would get in a real room or a real conference area, and that's just something that can't be done on video-based platforms.
Yeah. So I can completely confirm that. I was actually one of the lucky ones that went to the HTC Vive ecosystem conference in VR when it was airing. And it was also my first virtual reality conference that I went to. And I was quite amazed by the types of talks that were given, not simply because of the content, but because of, say, the background or the immersive environment that was able to be generated within that talk. So one stands out in memory, where there was a video of a train in the slides of the speaker, and then as the train got nearer and nearer to the front of the slide, the train actually jumped out through the slide and came into or close to the audience. So it gave you a very visceral sense of what the speaker was presenting, and gave you a really solid idea of what is actually possible now, and I guess in the future for VR, for that level of immersion that you get nowhere else.
Yeah, you can really spice up things with we call these special effects, where you can bring in these objects to keep people attentive. Whereas quite often when you go to a conference and we say it's death by PowerPoint, where you're just sitting through like someone's PowerPoint presentation and they have 30 slides and half the audience are falling asleep. Whereas you can have really interactive elements. I do know during those talks as well, Alvin, the president of HTC China, he was talking about the coronavirus. So we had giant coronavirus floating
Yes.
overhead, and everybody was in hazmat suits as well. And it's those little elements every maybe 5 or 6 minutes that keep people interested, keep people kind of really engaged with what's going on. And then one of the best things that we had was the social time. So halfway through the conference, there was a social break where for half an hour people can get up and talk to each other and walk around the conference, and you can have private conversations, these hallway conversations. That's something that can only be done in a virtual space, that cannot be done on a video-based platform, where you can go and have these one-off conversations with people that you just chance meet. And that's why people go to conferences. A lot of business is done actually at conferences. Why they send these salespeople to conferences is that 80% of the work is done with these hallway conversations on, met the CTO, and it's interesting what you're doing, here's what we're doing. And that's how people start businesses.
Yeah. And I think given the current situation that we're in, having the capability of having a conference like this in VR is so much more important than maybe even a year ago or so. I was in those hallway discussions, and it was great to be able to speak to people about the future of VR, the future of technology, from the kind of comfort of my own room. I can only see this going forward and being a very important tool if the coronavirus paradigm subsists or continues with us over the next year.
Yeah, I think anyway, even when the coronavirus is finally done and dusted, and I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, the way things are going at the moment, but there was a lot of concerns about environmental issues before coronavirus happened. And I think people are getting really used to working from home and not having to sit in traffic for hours on end, and not having to get on a plane for an hour-long meeting and then getting on a plane to return back home, traveling like nearly a full 12 hours. Like, I think those days are coming to an end, and I think virtual platforms will certainly come to the forefront more and more. And again, going back to like new jobs and how jobs are evolving, like I think the events industry in virtual reality, that's going to be a whole industry for other companies to really tackle as well. And there's going to be like full-time event planners inside virtual reality, full-time staff as well, making sure that everything runs smoothly. So that's one of the jobs I can see happening very, very early on in this space.
Yeah, very interesting. I had thought about that a little bit, but I'll have to talk to you offline, and maybe if you can connect me to somebody, it would be fascinating to talk to somebody who's actually creating an entire business or entire job in VR. One of maybe the last things I wanted to talk to you about was kind of the future of Engage. I mean, we've touched on it a little bit here, but I did read up that you now have a strategic partnership with HTC Vive, and this is enabling Engage to grow phenomenally in China. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so we're getting set to deploy Engage on Chinese servers very, very soon. And one of the core reasons for working with HTC, obviously, is the Chinese market is the largest growing VR AR market in the world, and they adopt technology very, very quickly. And to work in China, you have to either be a Chinese company or you have to work with somebody who's already established in China. And HTC are one of the leading hardware manufacturers of VR equipment globally, and they're especially relevant in China, even though they are a Taiwanese company. So we felt it was certainly the right time, especially with COVID-19 happening, that we feel we have a platform that is hugely valuable, especially in educational circles and businesses wanting to connect. We need to get into China. What's the best way to do this? We already had a long working relationship with HTC. We've been working with them on and off over the past 4 or 5 years, and we felt we had a good enough relationship where, okay, let's bring it to the next level. And we've signed a partnership where HTC will be pushing the Engage platform forward inside the Greater China region. And I think it'll be a win-win for both of us, where they're getting access to a very high quality platform where it's going to be very good for content creators and communication. And then we also have access obviously to HTC's vast network of business developers, salespeople, and also the hardware as well, and early access to hardware that they have coming up in the future. So it seems like a very strong partnership.
And I saw this morning, I believe one of your colleagues posted on Twitter that there's a app now for Android. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've released Engage on mobile phones and tablets, and really this is born out of the event space as well. So there's still quite a lot of people that don't have VR headsets, and a lot of the events that we're running, a lot of people want to join in and have those hallway conversations. Now, it is best if you have a VR headset, but next best, if you download the app, the Android app or the tablet app, you can still walk around and sit down and interact with people in quite a natural way. Not as natural as VR, but it's the next best thing. It's better than watching a live stream anyway, and it certainly is a lot better than that. So we've just really opened up access to the platform, and sure, like nearly everybody on the globe has access to a smartphone, and we'll have the iPhone version out before the end of the year. So it's really just broadens the spectrum of people we can talk to.
And for that, say if I have my headset on and I'm in a conference or some sort of event, and the person with the tablet or the smartphone, they would have their own avatar, but it wouldn't be as customizable or wouldn't be as I'd say immersive as, say, the avatar that I have, and that would be one of the only real differences.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as animated. It'd be kind of a similar experience to playing Fortnite on your mobile phone. So you can move around within the space, and you can raise your hand, and you can talk to people inside, but you wouldn't move as naturally as somebody in a VR headset.
Well, David, I think that was terrific. Thank you very much for the conversation. Those were the main questions that I had for you. I will post the Engage website up in the show notes. Do you have any preferred place where people can get a hold of you or follow you?
Yeah, you can follow us on Twitter, and our Twitter handle is @VR Education, and our website is www.engagevr.io.
Terrific. Well, I can't thank you enough, and I wish you all the luck with your interesting company. Thank you very much for coming on.
No problem. Pleasure talking to you.
So thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you want to support the podcast, you can leave a like or a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you want to get in touch, feel free to do so over Twitter or LinkedIn by searching for Automated Podcast. On the website, automatedpodcast.org, you can leave a comment on any of the episodes, read the transcripts, and look at the sources I use in all of these episodes. There are also blog articles and additional resources and information on this topic and podcast if you are looking for more. See you next week.
The Automated Podcast.